because this time I have my mic on in advance. I'm actually doing better at getting my stuff on here. Okay, let me pull it up over here too. Let me see. Okay. Let me see. Let me move some of this stuff out the way. Yeah. Okay. Hey y'all. Ignore my puppy. It's her birthday today. Sorry if y'all hear things twice. Moving some things out of the way. Hello, hello, hello. Okay. Hi, everybody that's joining. Like I always ask you to do, can you drop your name so I know who's in here? Just drop your name so I know who is here. Drop your name so I know who's here. I have the live chats up. I can put it right here. Hey, Darian. Yes, yes, yes. Drop your name. Hey, Tiana. I'm trying to see. Because I'm keep looking right here because I'm like, do I want this stuff in here? It's just, this is the Interpreter's Bible. Different volumes. I've never actually read it, but it's here. It's my mom's books. These are her books. Hi, Miss Tiffany. Y'all, this is my first time doing my hair like this with like a closure, so I'm still getting acclimated with it. I'm gonna get it down soon. What? Oh. Okay, yes, keep dropping your names in here. We've only been live for 1 minute, so. Yes. Okay. Well, while we also wait for some people to join and drop their names, if you were here the last 2 classes or lectures, can you drop in a chat an attribute of God that we've gone over so far? Or I guess just an attribute of God that you could even correlate to something that we've gone over so far. So even if it's not an attribute that I've listed, but then I want to know like how you correlated to what we've gone over. And if this is your first time on one of my, lives, then you could just say that. This is my first time. Make sure you have your Bible. Again, that's the only book you need. If you don't have it, it's okay because we'll be dropping the scriptures in the chat. This time I'm going to be able to drop the scriptures in the chat so you guys can read along with me. But yeah. Okay. So I'll give y'all some time to do that. Okay. God is a God who tempers justice or tempers judgment with mercy. Yeah. That's good. I say justice with mercy, but yeah, judgment with mercy. That's good. And my favorite, okay, your first time. Okay, yeah, God is a God who tempers justice with mercy. We went over that. I think that's something that we really talked about in our first live. So we pretty much broke down. If you hear the fire trucks, I'm sorry. But we pretty much broke down the story of, judgment works too. We pretty much broke down the story of Adam and Eve, how when they ate the fruit, they were naked and now ashamed. And so God told them that when they ate this fruit that they would surely die. And because God is a God of justice, he's a God of judgment, he had to carry that out because he's not a liar. So justice had to prevail. He's like, okay, I'm going to have to judge you for this. However, it's always going to be tempered with mercy. So instead of just kicking you out this garden now, I'm going to clothe you. So he could have just kicked you out, let them feel that on their own, because that was ultimately a result of or a consequence of their choices, right? But he still clothed them. Another example is when Cain killed his brother Abel. He told Cain, you will be a wanderer now. Again, so he's justice, it's judgment, but he tempered it with mercy because Cain said, well, what about people who want to kill me? He said, I'm going to put a mark on your head so no one wants to kill you. So again, justice, but he always tempers it with mercy. So, and it makes me think about, in my own life when there were certain things that went down, And I knew what I was going through was just me dealing with consequences. But because God is so good, He always tempers it with mercy. But okay, so we can go ahead and get started. So unless anybody else wants to drop something in, I was just recapping that really quick for Darian. Okay, so that's what we kind of went over that a lot in the first live. In the second live, some of the attributes of God are, I'm going to pull it up, or just a quick recap. We pretty much talked about the family tree, and I have this. Hi, hey Raquel. I pretty much have, oh, that's something else too. If this is your first time or if you've been here, if you notice, I didn't send the study notes from last live, but I have them already prepared to go after this. I have an alarm set. So once we end this live, I'm going to send study notes from Genesis 11 to Genesis 20. You'll have all of these notes. So yeah, we pretty much talked about the family tree. We talked about typology. Do you guys remember what that is? Typology. Typology. I always want to say typography, but do you guys remember what typology is? I'm going to give someone a minute to. Drop that. And while y'all drop that, I'm trying to. Do you guys remember? Okay, I'm going to just recap what it is because I was trying to see if someone, I like to give y'all time, and I know sometimes I'm like, I might be a little late on different things, but I'm trying to drop it so y'all can get it in the chat. Clark, I send it to you. But yeah, so typology is a type of Christ. So it's a type of Christ is a person, an event, or an institution in the Old Testament that serves as a symbolic representation or foreshadowing of Jesus Christ and His work in the New Testament. So we talked about Melchizedek. Melchizedek, how he was a type of Christ. I did mention how Adam was a type of Christ, and I did mention how Samuel is a type of Christ. Even though we didn't get to the book of Samuel yet, we did talk about how he's a type of Christ because he's the only one. Samuel's the only one who was ever priest, prophet, and judge. And the only other person in the New Testament who was priest, prophet, and judge is Christ. So these are just symbolic representations of Christ in the Old Testament. So we talked about that. Okay, so we'll go right into Genesis. So tonight we're going to be in Genesis 16 through 20. Now, if y'all noticed, the first time I was able to do Genesis 1 through 11 in under an hour, or like right at an hour. Then last week we did like 11 through 15, and it was a little over. But I think I got a good rhythm now. So we shouldn't be here this long. We're doing 16 through 20. I don't have a lot of notes, so it's more. We're going to be doing more reading together tonight. And so again, also Darian, if this is your first time, this is God is a God who. So it's pretty much an in-depth study of scripture. I am a student at Houston Christian University. My degree plan is biblical studies, minoring in apologetics. So I love scripture. I love going deep into scripture. I love learning about who God is because ultimately the Bible is a book about Jesus. A lot of times we try to find ourselves in the Bible. Lucky enough, not lucky enough, but God is so gracious that He invites us into His story, but it's ultimately His story. And so what I like to tell people is this is God's book. This is our history. This is how the world was created. This book is good for teaching. It's good for doctrine. It's good for correction. It's good for instruction. And it's ultimately Jesus Christ's story and our story. And so the more you open this Bible just to learn about who God is, I always say, imagine sitting at a coffee shop and God is sitting across from you. You're saying, okay, so tell me about yourself. This is Him telling you about Himself. And so ultimately, that's what we do. And the cool thing about God is, as we go through this book together, the more when you need it, it's gonna you're gonna get the revelation. So there might be a moment where you're actually in a coffee shop, or you're just in a car driving, and something comes up, and you can recall this story. There are many times where people call me with issues, or just different complaints, dealing with things in their marriage or their relationships, or just their just where they are in their lives. And instead of giving them just some random advice, I can say, well, think about how God called Abraham righteous because of his faith. So in this season, just have faith that God would do it. Like, a lot of times, it's better to give someone that word, because it's the word that cuts. It's the word that heals. So instead of just giving a lot of motivational speeches or quotes, a lot of times you can encourage people with the word of God, but many times we don't really know the word of God. So yeah, so let's get into it. Again, tonight we're in Genesis 16:20. So we're going to open the book right there. Or the book. Yeah, the book, the Bible. So 16 is talking about the birth of Ishmael. So pretty much what's happening, if you remember, Abraham is like, okay, God, you told me the descendants will be as many as the stars in the sky. I can't count these. And you told me that I would have a son. And so that was back in 15 when Abraham, well, he had already gave Abraham the promise, but in chapter 15, Abraham was like, but I don't have kids. Like, what's up? I don't even have children. And so God pretty much told him just to have faith. Abraham believed, and God counted him as righteous. And then again, this passage alone, that passage that I just referred to, is quoted 3 times in the New Testament. Anytime something is quoted like that, it's important, so we should know it. And that's Genesis 15, just for anybody who wants to go read that chapter again. So now fast forward, we're in chapter 16. They still don't have a kid. So his wife, Sarah, or I'm going to refer to her as Sarai because her name hasn't been changed yet. But Sarai, she's like, all right, we still don't have kids, but I have my maid here. Her name is Hagar. How about you sleep with Hagar? You have a baby with Hagar. That will be our descendant. And so Abraham agreed. Now, of course, Abraham is going to agree. He's a man. And back in the day, that's how it was. When you're married, and we'll talk about this a lot more when we get to Jacob's story, but when your maid would have, sex with the husband and have kids, that was technically like the husband and wife, that was their children. And so Abram agreed. And now here is Hagar. She gets cocky. She's like, oh, I have an heir, like I have a son with him. And now Sarah's mad. She feels some type of way. And so Abram is like, that's your maid. You do with her as you please. And so now Sarai is very mean to Hagar, right? And so Hagar leaves. Now let's read a little bit. We're going to go to Genesis 16. We're going to read Genesis 16, 1 through 3. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had not been able to bear children for him. She had an Egyptian servant named Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, the Lord has prevented me from having children. Go and sleep with my servant, for perhaps I can have children through her. And Abram agreed with Sarai's proposal. So Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, the Egyptian servant, and gave her to Abram as a wife. This happened 10 years after Abram had settled in the land of Canaan. So that's where we get that. Now we're going to jump down to 16:4. So Abram had sexual relations with Hagar, and she became pregnant. But when Hagar knew she was pregnant, she began to treat her mistress, Sarai, with contempt. So again, Hagar got cocky, and so now she's being mean to Sarai. So now we're going to jump down to 16:6. Abram replied, look, she is your servant, so deal with her as you see fit. Then Sarai treated Hagar so harshly that she finally ran away. I want to see if I want to stop there for a while. Yeah, so she finally ran away. But again, God, he's just so good. And we're going to talk about this attribute. He's the God who sees. He's the God who hears. That's where we get El Roy. And we're going to talk about that. So I want to jump down to 16. I'm going to say 16:9, but I'm going to read a little bit of 8 before we go there. So, well, pretty much, so now the angel of the Lord, she found Hagar, or the angel found Hagar and like, what are you doing here? And Hagar said, I'm running away from my mistress. So that's where we are right now. And so she said, I'm running away from my mistress. The angel of the Lord told her, return to your mistress and submit to her authority. Then he added, I will give you more descendants than you can count. So now I'm going to jump down to 11. Or the next verse. And the angel also said, you are now pregnant and will give birth to a son. You are to name him Ishmael, which means God hears. And for the Lord has heard your distress. Oh, the Lord has heard your cry of distress. Sorry, sometimes in the creases, I can't read the words. Yeah, the Lord has heard of your cry of distress. And so now we're going to jump down to 13. So 16:13. Therefore, Hagar used another name to refer to the Lord who had spoken to her. She said, you are the God who sees me. In another translation, this is the NLT, it's El Roy. So the God who sees me. But Ishmael means the God who hears. So El Rohi. And so that's where we get that. A lot of people, they refer to God as El Roi, and that's ROI, and that's where we get that. That's what she called God. And so that's where we are in this story right now. So Sarah, she was impatient. Hagar was a little cocky, and so that's where we are right now. And many people know this, but Muhammad, I believe, is a descendant from Ishmael because God also told him, then he added, I will give you more descendants than you can count. So I think that that's interesting that Abram had birth to both of those nations, but God, we are the children of Israel, we are God's chosen. So I think that's interesting. If you have questions about that, let me know. We can go in deeper. Otherwise, I'm going to keep going. But yeah, Ishmael was the king of the Arab. So I'm going to keep going. So now we're in Genesis 17. So this is where the name changed finally, because I keep saying Abraham and Sarah because God, he changed their names. So he changed Abram's name to Abraham, and he changed Sarai names to Sarah. And so it's always interesting because Sarai and Sarah, from my understanding, they mean the same thing. But Abram and Abraham, they have two different meanings. So we're going to go to Genesis 17 and 5. Genesis 17 and 5. What's more, I am changing your name. It will no longer be Abram. Instead, your name will be Abraham. And so Abram means exalted father. Abraham sounds like a Jewish term that means father of many. So it makes, everything God does makes sense, but I can see why it went from Abram to Abraham. And then right here in 17:7, we're going to read 17:7 through 8. He said, I will confirm my covenant with you and your descendants after you from generation to generation. This is the everlasting covenant. I will always be your God, the God of your descendants after you. And I will give the entire land of Canaan where you now live as a foreigner to you and your descendants. It will be their possession forever, and I will be their God. So right here, before we jump down to the name change with for Sarah. So right here, I'm gonna jump down. Or do I want to read that right here? Because I'm trying to see if I want to go to the mark of the covenant before I break this down. Okay, yeah. I'm actually going to read about the mark of the covenant first before I keep going. So now there's a mark of the covenant. God said that all the males in Abraham's house needed to be circumcised, I believe, on the 8th day. And so now we're going to read 17:9 through 14. Then God said to Abraham, your responsibility is to obey the terms of the covenant. You and all your descendants have this continual responsibility. This is a covenant that you and your descendants must keep. Each male among you must be circumcised. You must cut off the flesh of your foreskin as a sign of the covenant between me and you. From generation to generation, every male child must be circumcised on the 8th day after his birth. This applies not only to members of your family, but also to the servants born in your household and the foreign-born servants whom you have purchased. All must be circumcised. Your bodies will bear the mark of my everlasting covenant. Any male who fails to be circumcised will be cut off from the covenant family for breaking the covenant. So now I want to break down what I just said. So he basically said everybody needed to be circumcised. All the males in his house, any new males born on the 8th needs to be circumcised on the 8th day. So this means that these older men needed to be This means that the older men, thank you, Tiffany. This means that the older men needed to be circumcised when God gave the covenant. But the cool thing is, new males had to just be circumcised on the 8th day. Because I think, like, ouch, like y'all were, especially Abraham, he was old having to get circumcised. But that's what it was. And so this was a reinstatement of the covenant in 17:7. And so this also lets us know that he does not make unconditional covenant. That was something that was so interesting to me. And we see that throughout the Bible, but this makes it very clear. So God always has covenant conditions. So he does not make unconditional covenants. Right here, it says God always expects obedience with his covenant. Reinstatement always shows obedience. And then in 17:7, it says, then God said to Abram, your responsibility is to obey the terms of the covenant. You and all your descendants have this continual responsibility. So every covenant comes with a condition. We see this in David's story. There was a covenant, and then David killed a woman. I mean, not killed. He committed adultery with a woman, killed her husband. We see it with Solomon. All the women that he married, he had 700 wives and 300 concubines, and they turned his heart away from God. And so we see what happened with that covenant. But there is a part where he said you will be blameless. However, blameless doesn't mean 100% holy, but to do God's will and to please him. So when God says to be blameless, he's saying he wants you to be able to do his will. That's not always 100% holy. No one is 100% holy except for Jesus Christ. So let's start there. So yeah. And now we're going to jump down before we go into 18. Let me make sure I said everything. Before we go into 18, if you go to 17:15, it says, Then God said to Abraham, regarding Sarai, your wife, her name will no longer be Sarai. From now on, her name will be Sarah. And so that's where he changed her name. I just wanted to make sure I touched in on that. So now we're going to go to 18. So a son is promised to Sarah. This is where the Lord actually came and visited Abraham. I thought that was pretty cool. He came with two other men. We know that they're angels because of what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah. So Abraham, he saw 3 young men traveling a long journey. Abraham, I can say Abraham now. Abraham and Sarah, they entertained them. They made them food. They gave them water. They gave them shade. And then they had a conversation with them. One of the men there was the pre-incarnate Christ. So that just means Christ before his time. And the pre-incarnate Christ predicted Sarah would become pregnant. So now we're going to read Genesis 18:3. And so when Abraham saw these 3 men in 18:3, it says, my Lord, he said, if it pleases you, stop here for a while. So he knew that was God. He said, my Lord, if it pleases you, stop here for a while. And so that's where, and if you keep reading, they rested in the shade. They gave them food. They replenished them. They refreshed them before they continued their journey. And so here, the Lord is having a conversation with Abraham. Sarah is listening in the background. 18:10 says, then one of them said, I'll return to you about this time next year, and your wife Sarah would have a son. Sarah heard the conversation, and she laughed to herself. She laughed in her belly, which is funny because they had a son, Isaac, which I believe means laughter. So I thought that was funny. Like, he has a sense of humor. Like, all right, you want to laugh? Bet your son's name is going to mean laughter. So, and then in Genesis 18:13, then after he heard Sarah laugh, because Sarah was basically like, I'm old. So her laugh wasn't just like cocky or anything. She was just like, I'm really old. Like, it's funny to me how, you keep saying I'm gonna have a kid. Where he at? And so Genesis 18:13, it says, then the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh? Why did she say, can an old woman like me have a baby? Is anything too hard for the Lord? So this lets us know this was the pre-incarnate Christ. And then that's when he said, I'll return about this time next year again, and Sarah will have a son. And then Sarah was afraid. She denied it. She said, I didn't laugh. But the Lord said, no, you did laugh. So yeah. So the Lord actually came and visited him. And so a lot of people, they always also wonder, outside of, typology, which are types of Christ, which are people or figures we see in the Old Testament that refer to God in the New Testament, the coming of Christ. This is also cool, but like I said, the pre-incarnate Christ actually came to visit Abraham. So now what's happening right after that in this same story, which one of my favorite stories, this is where we learn about God's perfect will and his permissive will. So now the Lord basically let Abraham know, oh yeah, right? Yeah, like, no, you did. Like, I know what you did. I mean, there's no point of lying to God. It's almost like, it reminds me of when Adam was like hiding from God. He was like, basically like, I ain't do nothing. And God already knew the truth. But yeah. So now in 18 really it's 1816 up until the end. So 16 to 33, but we're not going to read all that. I mean, like I've been doing, I'm going to give you guys an overview. So now what's happening here is the Lord told Abraham that he was on his way to Sodom and Gomorrah. He said, I want to see if this place is as bad as from what I'm hearing. And if so, I am going to destroy this city. And I think this is so interesting because now, so we are going to read 18:20. So Genesis 18:20. It says, so the Lord told Abraham, I have heard a great outcry from Sodom and Gomorrah because their sin is so flagrant. How do you say that? I'm in NLT. I'm saying it right. I'm asking y'all like y'all can talk back to me. It's Flagrant. Flagrant. Thank you. Chelsea flagrant. Thank you. So their sin is so flagrant. I'm going down there to see if their actions are as wicked as I have heard. If not, I want to know. So I think that that's interesting that a place like, we read that God inhabits the praises of his people. But here it's also letting us know, like, if you could be so wicked that God is like, no, I want to come and see for myself. Is this as bad as people say it is? Like, that was interesting to me that flagrant that they're flagrant, and to me it sounds like fragrant. So I feel like it's like a smell, like a aura that's just so bad, right? But we can look that word up, or y'all want to help your girl out, you can just drop the definition here for me. But yeah, it's so bad. I'm reading from the NLT, Genesis 18:20. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. So the other men turned and headed towards Sodom, but the Lord remained with Abram. So now this is where, again, we get God's perfect will and his permissive will, because Abraham interceded. This also lets us know that we can intercede on behalf of people. It's so powerful to intercede on behalf of people because Abram know his nephews out there. Lot, we learned about Lot. We learned that that's Abraham's nephew. We learned that they both had a lot of cattle. They both had a lot of people, so they could no longer share the land. So they had to split. We went through that. Abraham already saved Lot once, and now here he is. Now he's interceding on his behalf. So Abraham interceded on his behalf. He said, God, if you find 50 people, will you not destroy the city? God said, if I find 50 of them, I won't destroy them. He said, okay, hold on. If you find 45, will you destroy the city? He said, we found 45 righteous people, I won't destroy the city. He said, okay, wait, but what about 40 people? Same promise. If I find 40, I won't destroy it. What about 30? Same promise, I won't destroy the city. What about 20? Same promise, I won't destroy the city. What about 10? This also is a great example of tempering justice with mercy. God is just merciful. He said, if we could find 10, it went from 50 to 10. He said, if we could find 10 people, I won't destroy the city at all. This is Genesis, where are we? This is Genesis 24. Genesis 18:24. Or we're going to start 23 to 33. And so it says, Abraham approached him and said, will you sweep away both the righteous and the wicked? Suppose you find 50 righteous people living there in the city. Will you still sweep it away and not spare for their sakes? So that's what Abraham was thinking. For he was really thinking of Lot. He knew Lot was righteous. And so he was like, will you throw it away if you just find 50, good people? And so that's when he says, surely you wouldn't do such a thing, destroying the righteous along with the wicked. Why would you be treating the righteous and the wicked exactly the same? Surely you wouldn't do that. Should not the judge of all the earth to do what is right? So Abraham had questions. Like, you go erase the whole city for just a few people? And so the Lord replied, if I find 50 righteous people in Sodom, I will spare the entire city for their sake. Then Abram spoke again. Since I have begun, let me speak a little further to my Lord, even though I am but dust and ashes. Suppose there are only 45 righteous people rather than 50. Will you destroy the whole city for the lack of 5? And the Lord said, I will not destroy it if I find 45 righteous people there. Then Abraham pressed his request a little further. Suppose there are only 40. And the Lord replied, I will not destroy it for the sake of 40. Please don't be angry, my Lord. Abraham pleaded, let me speak. Suppose only 30, right? It was funny to me how Abraham was talking like, I'm begging at this point. Let me speak. He said, don't be angry. Let me speak. Suppose only 30 righteous people are found. And the Lord replied, I will not destroy if I find 30. Lord, let me continue. Suppose there are only 20. And the Lord replied, then I will not destroy for the sake of 20. Finally, Abraham said, Lord, please don't be angry with me. If I speak one more time, I just got one more request. Suppose there are only 10 there. And I wonder if Abraham was thinking like, it has to be bad if he's about to destroy this. So let me just go, like, if you're going to accept my request, let me keep pressing it. So he said, don't be angry with me if I speak one more time. Suppose only 10 are found there. And the Lord replied, then I will not destroy it for the sake of 10. When the Lord had finished his conversation with Abraham, he went on his way. And Abraham returned to his tent. And so again, this is where we get God's perfect will and his permissive will. Perfect will, if you're taking notes. God's perfect will always be his best will. However, God works with us because of our stubbornness. You see, like, we can be stubborn. Like, what if you find this many? What if you found that many? And in his perfect will, his word never contradicts itself. So it's always the best will because his promises are perfect. So you really always want to go with God's perfect will. But there's also something called a permissive will. So God's permissive will always has consequences. I think of not only this story where this was a permissive will where God is saying, okay, my perfect will is just to destroy it all. That might have been not included. However, my permissive will, okay, will go your way. I also think about, well, we all know when Jesus was praying to God and he was praying, he said, God, take this cup from me. That was that would have been the permissive will. He said, but then he thought of God's perfect will. Nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done. I think about King Hezekiah. Isaiah told him, he said, you're going to die and we're going to get there. I think it's in 2 Kings 20:5. But he said, you're going to die. Isaiah pretty much told him you're going to die. And when Isaiah left, King Hezekiah turned to the wall and he prayed to God. He said, Lord, I don't want to die. I really don't want to die. And so God talked to him and he spoke to Isaiah because Isaiah had left after he gave him the word. And he said, Isaiah, go back to Hezekiah and tell him I'm going to give him 15 more years. And so he went back, he told Hezekiah went and prayed in the temple. So that was God's permissive will. His perfect will was death. And the reason why is because Hezekiah ended up having a son, which the Bible lets us know was the most wicked king, I believe, of Judah. I'm going to fact check that. I hope that is right. Somebody can fact check it for me. Because I don't think it was Israel. I believe it was Judah. And so he ended up so in that 15 years that he stayed alive, he ended up birthing one of the most wicked kings that they had ever had. So it's like God's permissive will always has consequences because had Hezekiah, died, then he wouldn't have birthed the wicked king. So I hope that makes sense. So that's the difference between God's perfect will and his permissive will. His perfect will is always the best will. His permissive will always has consequences. And this lets us know that God is okay with us asking questions. God is okay with us pleading and asking. God is okay with us interceding on other people's behalf. Especially if it's not a, unholy request. Like, can I, what do you say? It's a guy. Can I live longer, God? Or can you spare the city, God? Or take this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done. Like, so it's okay to ask. A lot of times, but it's also okay with saying, God, I just trust your sovereign. I trust your holy. I trust your perfect will. But God is okay with us asking him and asking more than once. Here, Abraham, you can clearly see he's asking more than once. Like, okay, well, God, what if you find this? Then can it stay? Okay, what if you find 10 righteous people? Then will you spare the city? I said, can I stay? Well, can you spare the city? So we see that you can ask God. Um, was it his son Josiah? Manasseh. Oh, okay, perfect. Thanks, Shell. And thanks, Tiffany. So yeah, Manasseh, king of Judah, was the evil king. Yeah. So Hezekiah, his son Manasseh, was one of the most wicked kings ever, and that was Hezekiah's son. So again, permissive will always has consequences. So we have to consider that God will say, yeah, but you have to consider that. Okay, so now we're at Sodom and Gomorrah. And so last week we learned that Sodom and Gomorrah wasn't the only place that God destroyed. If you remember the other two places, I want you to type it in the chat. And the place that I'll tell you, Zor is the place that he didn't destroy. And this is why. He didn't destroy. So it was 5 places that were wicked. Zor was among them. Am I saying that right? Zor, right? Zor was among them. Yeah. However, because Lot went to Zor, that's why that place didn't get destroyed. So I thought that was cool because they weren't great people either. They just had Lot there, and I guess they were less. Maybe it was less wicked people in the Sodom and Gomorrah. So you remember when? So 3 men visited Abraham. However, 3 men visited Abraham. However, only 2 went to the city, and they were angels. They were angels. I'm sorry, y'all. I was trying to see if this was ant. Okay. Only 2 went to Sodom and Gomorrah. So the Lord wasn't with them anymore. So Lot saw the man and he invited him into his home. So when the men around the city knew that Lot had men at his home, they wanted to go to Lot's house and they wanted to have homosexual relations with the men there. But Lot tried to persuade them to not do that. He even offered his daughters instead. And so we're going to read that in Genesis 19:5. We're going to start at Genesis 19:5. So they shouted to Lot, "Where are the men who came to spend the night with you? Bring them out so we can have sex with them." So Lot stepped outside to talk to them, shutting the door behind. "Please, my brothers," he begged, "don't do such a wicked thing. Look, I have 2 virgin daughters. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do with them as you wish. But please leave this man alone, for they are my guests and are under my protection." "Stand back," they shouted. This fellow came to town as an outsider, because mind you, Lot wasn't from Sodom or Gomorrah. So that's why they called him an outsider. This fellow came to town as an outsider. Now he's acting like our judge. "We'll treat you far worse than those other men." And they lunged towards Lot to break down the door. And so when that happened, the 2 angels, they grabbed Lot, they pulled him in the house, and they blinded the other men. And so now all the men were blinded. They stopped trying to get in the house because they blind. Which I think that was interesting because it says in Genesis 19:11, it says, "Then they blinded all the men, young and old, who were at the door of the house. So they gave up trying to get inside." And I think about that word "gave up" is so interesting to me. Like, y'all were so persistent in this that they had to blind you. Like, that was just interesting because they used the word "gave up." So now the angels are now advising Lot and warning him that they were there to destroy the cities. And so when they told Lot was trying to get his daughters. He was trying to get, I believe, his son-in-laws. Yeah, his son-in-laws, his daughters, whoever else, whatever other relatives he had in the city. The son-in-laws didn't want to come, so he took his daughters, he took his wife with him. And so now they're running for their life. And they didn't want Lot to even go to Zor. They wanted him to go somewhere that was further off, but Lot was basically like, "I can't go that far." And that's how he ended up in Zor, and that's how Zor didn't get destroyed. And that's in Genesis 19. We're going to read Genesis 19:18 through 22. "Oh no, my lord," Lot begged. "You have been so gracious to me and saved my life, and you have shown such great kindness, but I cannot go to the mountains. Disaster would catch up to me there and I would soon die. See, there is a small village nearby. Please let me go there instead. Don't you see how small it is? Then my life will be saved. All right, the angel said, I will grant your request. Your request. I will not destroy the little village, but hurry, escape to it, for I cannot do nothing until you arrive there. This explains why that village was known as Zor, which means little place. So like I said, if Lot had not requested to flee to Zor, then Zor would have also been destroyed because it wasn't just Sodom and Gomorrah that were destroyed. And so we all know this popular part of the story. They warned them not to look back. No one to look back while they were destroying the city. Lot's wife looked back and she was turned into a pillar of salt. So we all know that popular story. I hope we all know. If you don't know that story and you want me to go deeper into it, just type in the chat, can you go deeper into that? And I will. But many of us know that story. A lot of people use it in their sermons. Don't look back. Don't look back. It's nothing there. So that's what happened. And so the last thing we're going to read in 20. Oh, yeah, we're good on time. The last thing we're going to read in Genesis 20 is Lot and his daughters. So now they go to the little mountain, or they were in Zor, but then they left Zor. And that's how you know Zor was still wicked. Because in Genesis 19:30, it says, afterward, Lot left Zor because he was afraid of the people there. And he went to live in a cave in the mountains with his two daughters. Because, mind you, his son-in-law didn't want to go. His two daughters just wanted to go. And then his wife, she turned into a pillar of salt, so it's just him and his two daughters. But he was afraid of the people even in Zor, which lets us know it was wicked, but they were spared because of Lot. And so now they're in this cave in the mountain, and his daughters are thinking to themselves, they're like, we don't have husbands, we don't have children, our family line is pretty much going to die. Hey, I have an idea. What if we go sleep with our dad, each of us, we become pregnant so we can pretty much preserve our family line. So now we're going to read. I'm going to start at 31. Genesis 19:31. One day, the older daughter said to her sister, there are no men left anywhere in this entire area. We can't get married like everyone else. And our father will soon be too old to have children. Let's come. Oh, yeah, they got him drunk. I forgot about that part. Come, let's get him drunk with wine, and then we will have sex with him. That way, we will preserve our family line through our father. So that night, they got him drunk with wine. And the older daughter went in and had intercourse with her father. He was unaware of her lying down or getting up. The next morning, the older sister said to the younger sister, I had sex with our father last night. Let's get him drunk with wine again tonight, and you go have sex with him. That way, we will preserve our family line through our father. So that night, they got him drunk with wine again, and the younger daughter went in and had intercourse with him. As before, he was unaware of her lying down or getting up. So Lot didn't know what was going on. They both became pregnant. And so Lot's oldest daughter, son name is Moab, and he that's where we get the Moabites from. And then the youngest daughter, and I said this name last time, Ben Ami, and that's where we get the Ammonites. The youngest daughter, that was her son name, Ben Ami, and we get the Ammonites. And so yeah, God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah and all the valleys around. And that's also listed in Genesis 19:25-26. But again, if you were on here last time, then we went through all the other places and all the other scriptures which correlate to. Lastly, because I thought this was the last chapter, but Genesis 20 is going to be quick because if you guys remember, we talked about how Sarah and Abraham would deceive people. He would pretty much say, you are so beautiful. When we go into these towns, people will want to kill me just so they can have you as their wife. So when we go to these places, tell them you're my sister so they will not kill me, which was a little lie with a little truth, because the truth is that was his half sister. They shared the same dad, Terah. Excuse me, they didn't share the same mom, but it wasn't the whole truth because this is your wife. So here in 20, Abraham deceives Abimelech. However, the Abimelech was the king of the Philistines. And so this also lets us know because, after a while, we go to battle with the Philistines a lot. We just go to battle with them a lot. I know Saul, David, all of them. We just fought with the Solomon. We fought with the Philistines a lot. But this lets us know here, at one point, we were actually peaceful with them. Because here in 20, Abraham is trying to deceive Abimelech. He's basically saying, "Oh, Sarah's just my sister." Abimelech, he tries to take Sarah as his wife, but then the God came to him in a dream, and we're going to go to 26. And it says, in a dream, God responded, "Yes, I know you are innocent. That's why I kept you from sinning against me and why I did not let you touch her. Now return the woman to her husband and he will pray for you, for he is a prophet. Then you will live. But if you don't return her to him, you can be sure that you and all your people will die." So God knew what Abraham was doing. He knew why he did it, but he spoke to Abimelech. He said, like, don't sleep with her. Don't take her as a wife. Actually return her and I'll restore everything. Because what happened is, if you go down to Genesis 20:17, when Abraham did pray, it healed Abimelech, his wife, and his female servants so they would have children. For the Lord had caused all the women to be infertile because of what had happened with Abraham's wife, Sarah. So because Abraham did that, it caused, hey, he caused all the women to be infertile. And so he said, like, go give him back to Abraham and he'll pray for you. And so here, Genesis 12, that's where it says, "And she really is my sister, for we both have the same father but different mothers, and I married her." So again, they really were half brothers and sisters. It's just that he didn't share the other part of this being his wife. But if you read 20:14, it says, "Then Abimelech took some of his sheep and goats, cattle, male and female servants, then presented them to Abraham. He also returned his wife Sarah to him. Then Abimelech said, 'Look over my land and choose any place where you like to live.' And he said to Sarah, 'Look, I am giving your brother 100 pieces of silver in the presence of all these witnesses. This is to compensate you for any wrong I may have done with you. This will settle any claim against me, and your reputation is clear." So on top of everything else Abraham had, he just got some more stuff on top of that. Because Abimelech was like, "No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to take her as my wife. I really didn't know. Here you go." Like, so again, if you read the last part of that chapter before we go into 21, we're not going to go into 21 tonight. You see that Abraham did pray for him, and and God restored his household. I'm sorry, I was trying to see why I put Isaac, because we don't even go into Isaac yet. So yeah, the Philistines had peace with I guess the lineage, because we don't see the children of Israel yet because Israel is not born yet. But they had peace with Abraham, and they would even be peaceful when Isaac gets on the scene. So we weren't always at war with the Philistines. And so to close, some attributes we get in these chapters that we just went through is God is a God who sees. Genesis 16:13. God is a God who hears affliction. Genesis 16:11. And again, Genesis 16:13, because Hagar called him El Roi, and then God is a God who hears affliction. He said, name him Ishmael, the God who hears. God is a God who establishes covenants. Genesis 17:7. This is when he established the covenant. He says, get everybody circumcised. God is a God who transforms identities. That's one of my favorite. He changed his name from Abram to Abraham. He changed her name to Sarai to Sarah. I know God changed my identity. I used to be cutting up a lot. And so I love that he will literally give you a new identity. I love how when he says to be born again, even when Jesus was talking to, I can't remember his name in the New Testament. If you remember his name, drop it in the chat. And he said, what do you mean be born again? How can an old man go back into his mother's womb and be born again? And he's basically saying be born with the Spirit. Like God will transform you when you surrender, when you're okay with it. And yes, a lot of times when you're born again or you start over, it's tough because you feel like I've already gone through this. I shouldn't have to do this again. But it's a beautiful thing if you think about almost getting a do at life, which is so interesting because Clark, she does her channel on Thursdays, the dressing room, and she's pretty much talking about taking off an old self and putting on a new self. Okay, God is a God who reveals his plan. Genesis 18:17. God, and that's when, I believe 18:17 is when he was talking to Sarah and Abraham, and he said, by this time I will return and she will have a son. God is a God who listens to intercession. So he listened to Abraham. So when you intercede on someone, God is hearing you. That's Genesis 18, 23, 33. Clark, can you drop these? Do you have this list? God is a God who warns of judgment. Genesis 19, 12, 13, because he warned these people before he was going to destroy everything. God is a God who shows mercy to the righteous. Abraham said, he said, you are the judge. Are you a God who will treat the righteous just like you treat the wicked, like that's not the kind of God I know you to be. So will you destroy the entire city if you find 50, 40, 30, 20, 10? So yeah, he's a God who shows mercy to the righteous. Last two, God is a God who protects his promises. Genesis 20:6-7. God is a God who restores and blesses. Genesis 20:17-18. So yeah, does anybody have any questions for me in this live? If there's an attribute that you love the most, that stuck out to you the most, you could drop it. If you just have a question, you could drop it. If you just have a comment, something that I didn't touch on, you could drop it in the chat. Not that one. I'm about to send it to you. I wonder if I could drop it with my other phone. I don't know where. Oh, I'm using it. Check out. Yeah. Yeah. Well, these attributes will also be in the study guide. If you, again, go to the home page, if you scroll down to the section that says God is God Who, and if you opt in to get the study guides, I will be sending this right tonight, like in the next 30 minutes, probably less. So let me know. But yeah, otherwise, I'm glad you guys have been enjoying this. I'm glad you guys have been coming on weekly, and I'm hoping just going through this line by line. I know I enjoy reading the Bible like this, just really just understanding his story and knowing his story. And the beginning is just, I don't know, I just love these stories. Okay, if that's it. Y'all, I'm in Houston, and it was snowing today. It was so cool. And I'm not even excited really about the snow for real, for real. I've been most excited that they actually, even though I love going to class, I also enjoy when they cancel it because then I can save some gas money. So they canceled class today and they canceled it tomorrow because of the roads. Because in Houston, we really aren't built for cold weather at all. Yeah, built for snow. Okay, well, if that's it, I just want to make sure I don't miss anybody. And if you did want to say anything, but we in live, you can always email me, write me on Instagram, and we can talk. Otherwise, then I hope y'all enjoy the rest of your night. Yeah, see y'all next Tuesday. I don't know, we'll probably do the same amount of books because I see how this one was under an hour, and I like that. So we'll probably do about 4 books next week. I'm just gonna have to take a look at my notes. Otherwise, talk to y'all next Tuesday. Bye bye.